we got an interesting development on the general election front. There's now been a slate of polls that have come out that show Biden is leading again. So do you have the numbers in front of you? You want to walk through that?
So what's noteworthy to me is not even so much Biden leading, but that in this series of recent polls, there's been a positive shift in his direction since January or February. These are all national polls, not battleground polls. But you've got Emerson that went from +1 Trump to +2 Biden. You've got, what do you say, TIPP, whatever, +2 Trump to +2 Biden. Ipsos tied to +2 Biden. KFF +4 to +4 Trump to +3 Biden. Civics tied to +1 Biden. And FAU, that's Florida Atlantic University, +4 Trump to +2 Biden. That last one was a likely voter screen versus all registered voters. All the rest of them were registered voters. But, it appears like there may be a little bit of a trend in the making of Biden picking up a little bit of ground. You also had this week, Kyle, the primaries, which surprisingly, even though Nikki Haley is out of the race, she still got a significant amount of the vote, 18% roughly in a couple of states this week, which I think you also have to take as a bit of a warning sign for Trump that someone would go out, even after Nikki Haley's out of the race, and Trump is the official presumptive nominee, and still be like, nah, fuck this dude, I'm going to vote for somebody else, I think is also, something to take note of.
So some of them are mail-in votes, which were mailed back when she was running, but some of them also aren't. And to make the apples-to-apples comparison, on the Biden side, now granted, he had a primary, it was a much less competitive primary, and then there were some states that were trying to make it so there was no primary at all. You guys know all the backstory, but Biden is kind of consistently getting around that 90% number when it comes to these races. To your point, with Nikki Haley dropping out, there are some states Trump only got 75%, 78%, 82%, and people are looking at this like, that really is not a good sign for the general election for him, because as much as he has a base that loves him and adores him and would never leave him, there's also now a decent number of Republicans who are like, I'm never going to vote for him. Whether they were Trump voters in the past or not, largely irrelevant. There's a good chunk that are just like, I'm not going to vote for him. Now, I'm going to ask you in a second why you think it is that Biden got this bump.
Yeah.
But here are the theories that I have. So one of them that I saw on Twitter, which I thought was a decent point. I don't think that the standard economic indicators are the best way to determine the health of the economy and the health of the American people. I don't believe that. But certainly mainstream media pushes out that idea under both Republicans and Democrats that the standard economic indicators are the way to go. Well, we have had very low unemployment for a while now, and we have had the market performing well.
Yeah.
And somebody said on Twitter that their theory was like, it lags a couple quarters before those good numbers will be reflected in the polling.
Yeah.
And while I don't think those indicators are the creme de la creme, at the same time, I do think that's kind of a fair point, because Biden's approval rating was so low that it's like, with an unemployment rate like this and the market doing as well as it is, maybe he should be at 40%, 43%, but the fact he was all the way down at 33%, it did seem a little anomalous. And you could pin that off to the fact that he's so old that he wasn't getting credit for those things, et cetera. But so that's one theory as to why he had this little bounce back. And by the way, when I say little, I do mean little. Most of these polls where he's leading is 2 points, 1 point. There was one Ipsos poll that just came out that ended with a 5-point lead. That's the biggest poll I've seen.
Yeah.
Biggest lead for him I've seen.
Seltzer poll that came out that
had Trump +7.
Yeah.
So basically we're at the point now where it's like flip a freaking coin. That's where we are. But that's one theory as to why he got this bump. The other one, of course, is just the State of the Union speech being a little more visible. He was able to hold it together better than most people thought, and so that could lead to a bump. And then the third thing is, Trump in the news all the time now. It seems like it revolves around his crimes, whether it's the various civil cases, the $83.3 million defamation thing with E. Jean Carroll, now the $454 million or $464 million, whatever it is, fraud case in New York, business fraud, insurance fraud, tax fraud, can't secure a bond for that. They may seize his properties. So now of all the headlines, it's like either him at a rally saying crazy shit, or it's criminal, 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 here's how he's a criminal. After a while, people, the laws of political reality apply less to Trump than to most, but they still apply to some extent.
Yeah.
Right? So that could be it. What's your theory as to why Biden's?
Those are my three theories as well. Those are
nice.
Yeah, those are my three theories. I mean, it could be a combination of all of them. I'm also not 100% convinced there is even a Biden bump because some of the polling is a little conflicting. If you look at the Real Clear Politics average, it hasn't really changed. Trump overall, in terms of the average,
include a lot of the pro-Biden polls yet.
Is roughly 2% in favor of Trump. So I'm not even 100% convinced there is a trend here. But if there is, those are exactly the things that I would potentially attribute it to. You know, on the economic front, it's not just unemployment's low and the stock market is up. There's also consumer sentiment has improved significantly. And you have had, for a while now, wages increasing and outpacing inflation. So again, I echo your sentiments that does not mean all is well with the American consumer or with Americans and the economy in general. But there are some things that, have improved. And it does make sense to me there could be a lag there in terms of giving Biden credit. So that's not a crazy idea to me. Certainly, I'm sure the Biden people are loving this, are holding on to it for all it's worth. But I can tell you one thing that is not helping him, and that is the continued support of a genocide in Gaza. So that's a considerable weight on his prospects.
The other thing to keep in mind, too, is while in the Real Clear Politics average, like you said, Trump is +2 in that. That is going to come down once they include some of the newer polls. So we'll be closer to dead, even Stevens. Mm-hmm. But something to keep in mind is that's not really going to be the general election race. The general election race is going to have Jill Stein on most of the ballots. They're probably going to have a libertarian. And then it's an open question as to how many ballots RFK will get on, Cornel West will get on. RFK will probably get on more ballots than Cornel West. Yeah. He's already gotten on like 3 or 4 or something like that. So, and when you do just when you look at it, Biden, Trump, and RFK, you go from Trump +2 to Trump +4.3.
That's a good point.
So it's like, it is way, way, way too close for comfort. But as we always point out when discussing this, it really is a fucking race to the bottom with this stuff. Absolutely. It's like the absolute insane dictatorial criminal or the man who's half asleep who's funding a genocide and also cut out those pandemic social safety net programs, which were a lifeline to a tremendous number of people. So I'm not doing a full false equivalence here and saying they're equal. They're definitely not equal. But at the same time, I think the sense everybody's getting, the sense normies are having is like, who do I hate the least? That's who I'll vote for.
Yeah. No, that is the race. That's it right there. Whoever wins, the majority of the people who hate both of them will be the next president. Yeah. That's what it's all about, is because that is such your guy you love, Stephen A. Smith, he was saying something about how he's disgusted with, these two and like, okay, we really not do any better. I mean, this is such a common sentiment. You can almost talk to anyone, no matter their political ideology, and find a lot of common ground being like, what are we doing here? It's the race no one wants, and yet somehow we ended up with exactly the race that Americans dread the most. So in any case, we'll see if the trends continue and what to attribute them to. And then the last thing that I'll add to this in terms of the numbers, there's some really interesting, if you dig into some of these polls, data points around people who typically don't vote but who are saying they're going to vote in this time around versus people who routinely vote. Those people who were like 2022 voters and they were 2020 voters and they show up every time, they tend to favor Joe Biden. Trump has a huge lead. The last one I saw was like 23 points among people who haven't voted before. So that's going to be another big determining factor of like, are Democrats able to succeed because the most reliable voters have now shifted over into being largely in the Democratic camp versus Republicans relying on these infrequent voters. That's kind of their cope about why they're doing so poorly in the special elections, but it's going to be different in a presidential election because they say, oh, well, those people will turn up when it's a presidential year. But that's the other big question mark is like, who even should these pollsters be talking to? What is the universe that's actually going to turn out? It's such a crapshoot. It's such a crapshoot. It really is. On the Democratic side, you got uncommitted. You got those devastatingly bad polls with young people. And in battleground states, the numbers still look really bad. So all that is legit. But what's also legit is there is a real large chunk of conservative Republicans and
independents who lean right who are just like, I'm not going to fucking vote for Trump. I'm not doing it.
Yeah.
So
and
it's
Trump
like,
has really leaned into some very insane, like actual Nazi, like poisoning the blood of America about immigrants rhetoric that plays great in a Republican primary.
Terrible in a general.
But terrible in a general. And when
also,
that is the head along with the criminal charges, and you're seeing like week after week this just absolute insanity coming from him, it is a real reminder of like, oh yeah, that's what it was like when he was president.
And also the 2020 election denialism stuff. He's still going full speed on that.
Yes, he is.
And there is no doubt that was a huge factor in the Republicans massively underperforming in the midterms.
Yeah.
55% of their candidates that they were running were election deniers. And they did the worst. And this is the guy. He's the head of the election denying thing. And it's like, I'm sure there's plenty of conservatives looking at that like, shut the fuck up. Just shut up.
And
can you not talk about that or abortion, please?
And they're also nominating like a bunch of psychos. And
you saw the North Carolina guy is a total psycho, literal Holocaust denier type.
Yeah.
And then who was the other? Oh, the Ohio
guy. Now, this one is kind of okay, so there's the thing about, I don't remember the detail. You set up the account on
sucking
allegedly.
Dick. Let the man
live. They say it was an intern.
He wants to suck a dick every now and then,
But
right?
he also seemed to come out in favor of a national abortion ban with no exceptions, which may even be really the bigger problem for him. It was the Democrats put millions behind boosting this guy, by the way, in the primary. I don't know if you know that. Chuck Schumer's PAC spent like $2.9 million or something.
They always do
guy.
this, yeah.
So they really feel good about their prospects versus him. He has taken he's this, self-made businessman. He's taken these sort of like more populist positions. So it's not entirely clear to me they made the right play there, but I just think when you are nominating these candidates who are far out of the mainstream, it's a problem not just for those candidates, but it taints the entire Republican Party as a bunch of insane fringe wackos.
I think in the aggregate, this actually is a smart move from the Democrats, but, and there's a big but, every now and then one of those fuckers is going to win, right? You're not going to win every one against them. But, they beat Carrie Lake, they beat Herschel Walker, they beat Doug Mastriano. Like, you can go down the list of, like, psycho, loss. But every now and then, there's going to be one.
And then you're like, but Marjorie Taylor Greene, she is a member of Congress.
Lauren Boebert, right? Like, and this guy, to your point, classic Republican, says anti-gay stuff, and they found out that an email tied to him from, like, 2009 or something was on, like, adult gay friend finder.
When he said something like looking for young guys for a good time or something like that.
The second these anti-gay conservatives think nobody's looking, they're like, oh. It is a law of nature.
It really is like clockwork.
It's a
incredible.
law of nature.
Now, this guy, apparently he has made a big like Trump-era pivot. So he, in 2016, sort of like J.D. Vance, he was very against Trump, and he said, he's abhorrent or whatever he said about him then. And now that he sees the writing on the wall, he's gone full MAGA, like saying whatever he needs to say to the Republican base in order to get elected. So anyway,
Trump is
on
such
top
a
of
sucker,
everything,
man.
he also apparently doesn't really believe anything.
Trump is such a sucker. You can say 99 things that are like viciously critical of him, and then the second you make that pivot and you're like, actually, I changed my mind. I think he's awesome. He's like, welcome to MAGA.
Yeah.
You're on my side. We love you.
He
Amazing
also
person.
bowed out of the Senate race last time around to try to boost J.D. Vance. So there was also a bit of like, oh, well, it's his turn because he did the thing we wanted him to last time. He backed that. He took the anti-abortion side of that ballot initiative that they did in the state of Ohio, which I think also will be a problem for him.
That's going to be a huge problem. And he's running against Sherrod Brown.
Wildly unpopular.
And Sherrod Brown
Sherrod's a great politician.
He's very solid. I mean, look, he's been representing Ohio, which is now legit a red state. He's been repping Ohio as a Democrat for a really long time. So it's sort of like the Manchin effect in West Virginia, where he usually pulls it off, and you're like, how the fuck did this guy win again?
Yeah.
As a Democrat in West Virginia. That's Sherrod Brown in Ohio. Yeah. So this guy's got an uphill battle. He should probably go suck some more dicks.
He might be happier. In the long run.
I definitely think
you would. In the short and the long run.
Hey, y'all, do me a favor and like and subscribe. It helps out big time in the algorithm. Click the bell as well for notifications when videos drop. And watch that video on screen right now. You know you want to.